Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Caregiving Gen X Style. I'm Steve Mullen.
And I'm Jennifer Mullen.
In this episode, we're going to be talking about all the legal documents that might be needed by you, the caregiver. There are a lot of them that you or your loved one should have, and they can make your life much easier. So we wanted to do a rundown of them in case there's one you've forgotten. But first, Jennifer, how is your mom?
Yep, my mom is doing great.
Great.
Yeah, she's doing great.
Yep.
I would say one of the focuses recently for my brother and I has been related to actually post hospital/skilled nursing facility stay, and then realizing that, of course, she's got Medicare and she had partial Medicaid. Again, I've mentioned many times she's on a very limited income, but having the realization that really she should have full Medicaid services.
But yet she was only on partial Medicaid.
She was only on partial, should have full services. And then we start hearing about all the services potentially that would be available to her. And she is exactly the person who, Medicaid is made for. But man, let me tell you, that process to research, figure out how we even go about getting the full Medicaid and talking to the local county government social services office and being told one thing, and then talking to a couple of other people who are like, that's insane and that does not sound right. Meanwhile, the local government office is where it's supposed to be her social services worker. It has been a long road. And in fact, just before this podcast today, I got a text from my brother related to, we're now in the process. Spoiler alert. She ultimately is approved for full Medicaid, which is fantastic, because
wonderful.
There are going to be a lot of great services that really will be useful for her, and frankly, for my brother and I. Now we're in the process of, with every doctor's appointment we go to, it's just talking through and making sure we have everything squared away. So he was at a doctor's appointment with her today and trying to go through some of that stuff with her today. And then the Medicaid person called and walking through all of that stuff and learning a lot. And then I'm taking her to her rheumatology appointment tomorrow, and I'm going to have to talk through all of that to make sure the medication that she needs for her rheumatoid arthritis gets approved. It has definitely been a process. One thing I will say, in your area, wherever you may be, if you have I guess everybody has some version of it, but Senior Connections is an organization that I got directed to.
It's probably the local area agency on aging.
Well, they are connected to them, I guess.
They may manage it for our county. Let
me tell you, any of you out there, if you feel like you're kind of flailing around a little bit and don't quite know where to get all of your information, I ended up being connected with somebody there who has been absolutely amazing. And in fact, she actually just followed up with me today in an email. Hey, Jennifer, just checking in, making sure your mom is all squared away. Did everything all get taken care of? I mean, just helped, provided guidance and support, and helped me even there were documents that were showing up in the mail, and they seemed like conflicting documents. And I was scanning and sending pictures to her and saying, I don't know which one to look at. I'm not sure which thing I'm supposed to be doing at this moment. And of course, it's a very fine balance, because you don't want to accidentally do the wrong thing and then have something taken away that you didn't mean to have taken away in terms of a service or support or whatever. So if you the area on aging or any connected organizations, cannot say enough nice things about them.
Well, so. and you would hope that kind of assistance is out there, because this stuff is not easy. And that's really what the area agency on aging is for.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know, we've talked about this. We had our social worker on, early on in this series, Robin, who talked about it. And she said they're required to have a website, but some of them, they just have one PDF on there.
Right.
Some of them, it's hundreds of pages of information.
Yeah.
So you would hope that, at least there's somebody there who can answer the phone call and help.
Well, and part of why they were so helpful is just, she was then reaching out to the Department of Social Services, and they speak the same language. I mean, listen, I'm an educated person. My brother is an educated person. But man, when you start talking about Medicare and Medicaid, insurance will cover this, and deductibles and and prescriptions and do the Medicare and the Medicaid insurance providers align together, and do they provide dual services? I mean,
it's a bit much.
It is so overwhelming, and I felt so much better once I felt like it was almost like everything feeding into this funnel, and I only had to worry about the one person to connect with, because then she was kind of helping guide and take care of all the other things. So anyway, so that wasn't so much about mom physically, but just one of those things that my brother and I have been dealing with and managing and taking care of, and it's all finally, I think, kind of working out, which is great. And a little bit it's not documents, but it's like another thing that runs in parallel. Sometimes it's not documents you got to worry about having, but just these processes and procedures you have to get through. It's a lot. So, but that's enough about me and my mom. Steve, how's your mom?
I want to share a proud son moment.
Aww.
I'm very proud of my mother. So I went over there the other day, and it was a Monday, and Monday is bingo. Well, it's one of their bingo days, and it ends at the time that I usually get there. I think I've talked about this before. Sometimes it runs over and I get to play, but they were just wrapping up their last game when I got there. And when I got there, my mother was kind of leaning over with this woman next to her who I'd never seen before, and was explaining the calendar to her. And she said, okay, well, if you want to do this tomorrow, this is the arts and crafts. And you see where it says AR, that means activity room. Do you know where the activity room is? And she said, yeah, it's down by the salon. Yes, it's right past the salon. So if you want to do that tomorrow, you show up there at that time. And so what you want to do is go through and you mark all the things you want to do. And she was just helping.
That's awesome.
And I mean, I was so happy. I mean, I'm just really happy that she's already, after only being there about 6 months, she's already being one of the ones that jumps in to help people.
Right. And your mom was not afforded that luxury by anyone.
Oh, God, no.
When she first went into assisted living, the first facility. And so...
No, and she did get help in this one with the ladies that you directed her to, basically. Yes. You shoved her in front of.
I made her first set of friends there, yes.
Yeah, but on top of that, though, she said... she was telling me about what she was doing, because I was a little confused. And she said also they've started playing dominoes. They're almost going to have like a domino club, I think, which is kind of cool.
That is cool.
I've never played dominoes. My mother, said she's been playing it her whole life. The only thing I ever did, like I told her, was set them up and just knock them all down. But that's all I ever did with them. But, there was another resident, fairly new resident, who she was talking to who knew how to play, but has macular degeneration and can't see the dots very well. And my mom said, tell you what, when we play, I'll take a couple of games off and I'll be your eyeballs.
That's awesome.
It's awesome. It really is. So larger thing, though, this was kind of funny. I just found out about this today, and I haven't even told you about it. But my mother was asked, they're going to start up kind of a welcoming committee, which I think is a fantastic idea. And my mother was asked to be involved in it. She enthusiastically said yes, because in her old assisted living, they had talked about starting one and never did it. Mm-hmm. But in her last one, what that led her to do, and this is an example of someone who has a lot of time on their hands, she started writing up plans. She had multiple pages of plans that she kept and was able to find and presented to the community relations director.
Wow.
Fairly recently. She said, oh, well, I've got these sheets. I've got several sheets of things that were ideas that we could do. And we could do this, and we could do this, and we could do this. And I think he kind of got a little overwhelmed by my mother's organization and basically said, well, we're thinking after the first of the year, and I'll take care of it, basically. And she said, well, I've got all these ideas. And he said, well, I do want to hear them. He said, but I've been doing this for 14 years. I can get it started. Which it sounded a little on the rude side.
I feel like that's the best answer.
I think basically he was a little overwhelmed by her.
Okay, but there
coming
are ways.
At him with all the plans.
So, as a PR person sitting here, I'm a little bit like, there are ways that you could have messaged that.
You've got someone who's enthusiastic. You don't want to shut him down. And I just told him,
appreciate your enthusiasm. We need to get through the holidays first, and maybe we could sit down and talk about some of your ideas.
She may have cornered him a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's all going to be fine. I just said, look, let him take the lead. Let him tell you what to do. You can make suggestions later. Yeah. It'll be fine. Yeah. But she's really excited about it.
Well, that's good. That's good. Well, and I think, if I can say this, true testament to how amazing this place is where she is now. We've got the Thanksgiving holiday coming up soon, and our schedule for the last few years has been right my side of the family, which it's all small, very small. We're talking about a handful of people come over, and we shifted because we used to do Thanksgiving late in the afternoon, and it involved everyone.
It was I think my mother, my father. And geez, we usually had
everybody.
some stray off the street would come in.
Random person, maybe who didn't have anywhere else to go.
A friend who didn't have any place else to be.
So it's small, but we've done my side of the family the first part of the day, and then the second half of the day, you and I and the kids then have packed up a Thanksgiving meal and taken it over to the assisted living facility. Right. And this year, she's kind of putting you off.
She did. So I started talking to her last week. I brought it up. I said, let's talk about Thanksgiving. This is what we're going to do. And basically, laying out the same thing we've done for the last couple of years since she's been there or in assisted living. And she said, well, let me get back to you because I hear they do a really big thing for lunch on Thanksgiving Day. And actually, she cleared it up today. She said, well, yeah, it's apparently a big deal. And apparently the food is really good. And I said, well, maybe we can just bring you a plate the next day for lunch so you can have our food the next day, the more home-cooked food. She said, no, that sounds good. So, perfect. I mean, this is how much she is comfortable there.
I mean, it's wonderful. And I'm not saying that because, whatever. It's been fine to go over there later in the day on Thanksgiving. We kind of fell into a rhythm and it all worked out. But, good for her that she's happy and doesn't need specifically for us to be there on that day.
The only thing I hope, though, is that I hope there's a number of people still around because I suspect this is what I've noticed in these assisted living facilities is the people who are able to easily get out, get into a car, and go to their family for a holiday. They do that.
Yeah.
So...
Well, has she checked with her closer circle of friends?
Probably ought to suggest
you should ask that because, the worst thing in the world would be...
She's sitting there all by herself.
Right. If she is expecting her, ladies, we know the circle of ladies, the ones that I introduced her to.
Yes, you take full credit for that.
I do. But if they're not going to be there, she might have a change of tune. And to be honest with you, as the person who cooks all the food, I would rather know that.
Right. Before. I mean, she'll get good food, but it's a question of whether she's sitting there by herself.
Well, right. We don't want her to sit there by herself.
No, we don't want that.
So, yeah. And of course, we're already down. As we've talked about on this show before, and she has been a guest, our daughter, the nurse, it will officially be our first holiday without one of our children.
And so it begins.
With us. And
she has to work. Yeah.
So.
And, just opening up the curtain just a little bit, Jennifer and I, at one point when we were younger, when we were our daughter's age, we worked in TV and radio news, and you work on holidays. That's just the way it is. So we totally understand it. We worked every holiday, but we didn't at that point have kids. And,
but our families missed us, though, because we were not home sometimes on Christmas or Thanksgiving.
We did our best to just shift it a day or, do whatever. So this is going to be how it is for her because she's not going to have holidays off. We did find out, though, she does not have to work on Christmas, which is nice.
Yes. Very good. So, very good.
All right, let's move on to our episode.
All right, let's do that.
So as we said earlier, this episode's all about all the legal documents you may need as a caregiver. We talked about some of this in our end of life episode, which if you want to go back and listen to that, you can get some more. But we thought it would be a good idea to talk about the legal issues, and it really deserved its own episode.
Definitely.
We want to make it crystal clear. 100%. Neither of us are lawyers. We just talked about this. We are PR people. We used to be news people. We are not, under any circumstances, lawyers.
Don't even play one on TV.
We slept at home last night. We were not at a Holiday Inn Express. You should absolutely consult with a lawyer about anything we talk about in this episode.
Another note before we get to all of that is that unfortunately, if your loved one is suffering with dementia or Alzheimer's, they may not be deemed to have the mental capacity to agree to some of these documents. So this is why it is really important to get them signed and notarized as much as you can, before it gets to that point. And we understand some of you out there who are listening may already be at this point.
However, with one of the documents we're going to talk about, you can sign for them after the fact. So there's really three things we want to talk about here. The first one is the will. And I think this is the most important legal document that your loved one will have.
And that is so funny because I don't think it's the most important, but go ahead.
Well, it's the most important one for them. The next one we're going to talk about is the most important one for us,
I guess.
I think.
Okay. Well,
So, even if there's not expected to be any money or property or anything that family members can inherit, there may be things of value that they have, whether it's a little statuette or something that's valuable to them that they may want to distribute.
although it's funny, sorry, if I can, just for a moment, I think the reason part of it, like personally, I think about a will, I'm like, yeah, that is not an important document. There's nothing, which is fine.
There's not a lot for Gagi to distribute. No.
No.
And for a lot of people, there won't be.
No. And, there definitely are a few items in her apartment. Some are going to be things that my brother wants. Some are going to be things. And when I say things, I mean like I might want a jacket or a blanket or whatever.
But it may be a situation where, if you've got 5 kids, 10 grandkids, and you may think,
Yes.
okay, there's this little statuette that my grandson Bobby always liked to look at.
Right.
I want him to have that.
Well, right. It allows
So you want to make sure
them,
they make the decisions.
They get to make the decision on what they want to do with all of those things. So, if your loved one does not have a will, certainly different states might handle things differently. So in the end, it is one of those things. So this is where, right, yes, it could be important because it could lead to family arguments over who gets what and who does what.
Right.
And, right. You don't want to, and you hear those stories. I feel like you hear those kinds of stories all the time. Which and it's terrible.
So, if your loved one is mentally capable, make sure they get a will written up. I mean, my mother has a will. It does not go into specifics like this table goes to Steve. This table goes to the other son. This goes to the grandson. It's not that specific. So we're going to have to figure those things out later. But she's got the big stuff there about how things will be split up.
Right.
If there is money left
when
over.
she was of sound mind too, which is
she was much younger when she did it.
She was able to do it. One other, way that I've heard about people doing this, and I recognize this can be a really, really hard thing for some people to do. And we kind of talked about this a little bit when we had to move your mom out of her house. It's awesome if you can have your loved ones, if you feel like you can do it, right? Have your family members come over and actually go through your house with them.
Right.
And allow them. I definitely.
We talked about this in the Nightmare of Cleaning Out episode part 2.
Okay.
We did when we had Meredith.
Yeah.
Estate sale person. And we talked about that, where it's a good idea to plan for this stuff in advance. And, a will may not cover these little things.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, my mother has talked about, when she passes, she wants to split up the teapots.
I mean, of course.
And I don't think there's going to be any arguments about that. I mean, we'll all pick one. God, she's got 75.
Yes.
It'll be fine. So
actually, she has more than 75 now, but
that's right. She's picked up a couple. Yeah. But anyway, so I mean, if you can, it kind of feels weird to sit around and say, well, when you die, I want that.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying though. Like, if the person themselves, if they can get themselves in a state of mind where they can say, you know what, I really want to know that my son, my daughter, my grandchildren, that they have this thing that used to belong to me. And whenever they look at it, use it, wear it, whatever it is, they will think of me fondly. Mm-hmm. And if you can get yourself to that place, I do think that is kind of a cool way to do it personally.
Agreed.
So, I don't know. Y'all talk to me in 30 years.
Yeah.
And when it's my turn to do that, I don't know. Maybe I'll feel different.
I want Hannah to have the cat cookie jar that you despise so much. We've talked about this. It's come up. That's a little bit of a Easter egg. Mm-hmm. If you want to go back, that cookie jar has come up. Jennifer despises it and thinks it's a nightmare.
It.
I believe you said it was like a nightmare. You said those words. You said those words.
It's just, you
think it's ugly. It was my grandmother's.
Right.
It is not displayed.
You make me sound like a horrible person.
It is not displayed anywhere. No, it's in the pantry on the top shelf.
Oh, it is in the pantry.
It is not allowed to be displayed.
I'm looking behind me, so we're sitting in our dining room. I know you guys cannot see this. I'm sitting here, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's in the china cabinet right behind me. The salt and pepper shaker that match it are right there.
They are right there.
I'm looking at them right there.
Yes.
Well, that was enough of a display. We didn't need the whole
that's as
big
far as it
cookie
needs to
jar
go.
out.
All right, let's move
We
on.
digress.
Next thing, and this is the one that I was saying would probably be the most important thing for us as the caregiver is power of attorney.
Yep.
So this allows you to actually sign documents, enter contracts, do all kinds of things as if you are your loved one.
Right.
It's really, really important. You can conduct any business as if you are them.
Right. You can pay bills. You can sign a deed or on a house, property.
Exactly. I used it. So once my mother became wheelchair bound, I already had power of attorney. And by the way, whoever gave her the advice to get that. So she signed the power of attorney document after my father died, sometime after 2001.
Right.
Whoever gave her that advice. And I remember her telling me, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
What I don't need. What am I?
We didn't know.
What am I going to do with this? Well, thanks.
Back then,
thanks for letting me know. And she
ago.
put me in as the primary, and my brother is the secondary because he doesn't live locally. But I remember thinking, okay, well, that's great. Thanks for letting me know. That's kind of weird, but okay, fine. And I was like 30, 32, something like that. We didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
But let me tell you what. After she became wheelchair bound, I used it to sell her house. I used it to sell her car.
Yep.
And I use it every year to take care of her taxes.
Yep.
I can sign as if I am her.
Yep.
And it comes in handy so much. I've got a copy that just sits right next to my office in case I need it. And there's a scanned copy. And I'm like, oh, I'm power of attorney. I can do whatever I want. But it comes in so handy.
Well, and speaking of, I know I mentioned, I think just a minute ago about, you can cash checks too. I think we may have mentioned this on a previous episode, but yes, you can certainly do that when you have the power of attorney, obviously, but don't discount just also having a joint account
of course,
with your loved one. Now, I recognize some might caution, right? Because then you have the liability, right? If your name is on the account, you have the liability for the
account. Start
account
getting
and
bounced and stuff.
Yeah,
you're
but,
responsible.
Generally speaking, if you don't have those concerns, I mean, my mom and my name is on her bank account, so I think my name is on her checks. I mean, I don't remember because actually we don't use checks a whole bunch.
I know my name is on my mother's checks, actually, yeah.
But I have a debit, I have a debit card. I almost never use it unless I'm out. Sometimes if I'm not with my mom and I need to pick up something for her and, she's going to pay for it, I use that debit card. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. So.
My mother put me as I can contact her financial guy. In fact, I talk to him far more than she does.
Absolutely.
He almost never talks to her. He just calls me.
In all seriousness, though, when we're talking about the POAs, the most important point at which it becomes critical to have the POA is if your loved one becomes incapacitated, right? Because if you don't have that, I hate to use the word control. Power, well, literally, ability. It's in the name. Literally, it's in the name.
Yes.
But yeah, it's it can make things really complicated.
Well, and there's the whole thing with, if they're in the hospital, they're incapacitated, who's the next of kin? If you've just got the power of attorney document, you slam it down and say, okay, I'm going to make decisions.
Yeah. Otherwise,
there may have to be some coordination between, I don't know, who so-and-so might be the next of kin because they're the oldest kid. I mean, it eliminates all of that.
It does. It does.
Sure.
It does. And these conversations, and again, I feel like we may have talked about this in the past at some point, touched on it. Like these are, can be difficult conversations to have with your loved one because no one really wants to think about any of these things. But also if it can be framed as, listen, you're really doing us a favor. If you make these decisions, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever, if you make these decisions, then we don't end up in a difficult situation at some point, and we know that you don't want us to end up in a difficult situation at some point. Right. So if you can frame it that way, that's good. And
just a little side story, if I could, a little squirrel.
Sure.
So my mother, a couple of years ago, she came to me and said, "Oh, I've got this little life insurance policy." that your father took out for both of us, and it was supposed to be just big enough to cover funerals and such. And I haven't been paying on it. I said, okay, why? She said, well, it's such and such a month, and it just seems like so much. I said, okay. So I'm thinking I would love for her to have that. So just, let's say she lives another 15 years. She has no more cash. We don't have to pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I contacted the insurance company, and they basically said, yeah, no, it's done. She paid, she neglected to pay long enough where it's been canceled.
Yeah.
So I talked to her financial guy and said, would it be a good idea to put some money in a lockbox?
Right.
I mean, a quote unquote lockbox, just so we don't have to pay for this stuff because, funerals are expensive. And at that time I didn't really know what she wanted. We could talk a little bit about that later, but the good news, and we'll talk more, she's starting to make those plans and pay for them herself now.
Yeah.
But we'll talk more about that later. But it's just getting this stuff taken care of in advance.
Yeah.
If you can.
Well, and I think, it should be noted as we wrap up talking about POAs specifically that there are different types of POAs really, right? There's ones that cover, only medical access and decisions. And then there's ones that cover finances, like we've talked about. So it's really best to have both. But, maybe your loved one is not comfortable giving power over everything. So, POAs can also be temporary. They could have an expiration date on them or an option to be revoked, Well,
and I think, I know I wrote these copious notes that we're going off of here. I think any POA can be revoked, really, whenever the person says.
Well, right, whenever they say.
Of sound mind.
Yeah.
But, this even came up with our daughter when she went off to college. She went off to college in the fall of 2020. Yeah. So COVID, huge big deal. And it was recommended to us that get a power of attorney document because she's an adult. And if she has to go to the hospital, they may not be willing to tell you what's going on with her.
Yep.
Because
and that was definitely early enough and all of that, we were all very nervous about sending our daughter off to college and to live in a dorm situation. And side note, squirrel about that.
A squirrel about a squirrel?
I would say
it's like double squirrels.
It is. It's a lot of squirrels tonight. I would say that, however, those power of attorneys, when your kid goes off to college, you should do that. Forget COVID.
Yeah.
And that literally is like...
I don't think we ever did that for our son.
No, we did.
We did?
We did, but I think we did it like his first semester, first year or whatever.
Okay.
But I don't think we've re-upped it. And so now you're making me nervous because I'm like,
I don't think we ever did.
He's still only 20 years old and at college, and if something happens, okay, well that sounds like that's going to be a fun Thanksgiving holiday conversation.
So that's the funny thing. So our daughter went to a large university. Our son goes to a small university. And I do remember, and we are getting so far off track. I remember during the parents' weekend, somebody raised their hand in the parents seminar or whatever. And said,
Lord, don't get me started on that.
What happens if, little Becky has to go over to the hospital? They said, the hospital knows to notify us if a student is there and we will call the parent. This is what you get from going to a small university.
Right.
The big university where our daughter went, they wouldn't give dams about it.
Right.
So anyway, let's move on to the next one.
Yes, because truly you don't want to get me started on that whole like parents raising their hands asking what they needed to do for their children who are going off to college.
If you have kids that have gone off to college, you know what that parents' weekend with all the parents that were helicopter parents, lawnmower parents.
Will my child be able to retake a test 3 times to make sure they get an A?
Can my child bring a taser to school? That was an actual question during our son's orientation weekend.
I totally forgot about
it. Can our son, daughter, I think it was a daughter.
It was safety,
child
right? Thinking
bring
about
a taser to school.
Oh my gosh.
No, the
Guys,
answer is no.
Seriously, for those of you listening and who have maybe listened to us for maybe several episodes, seriously, there are a lot of different topics that we could just wax poetic about for a really long time. However, we are now going to steer back into the lane of this podcast and talk about medical directives. Directives. Something that no one really likes to talk about. But it is definitely good to know how someone wants to handle the end of their life. do they want to have heroic measures to save their life if they're not able to grant permission on their own? Do they want breathing support?
Right. I mean, it's a hard conversation to have. So there's different ways of doing this. There's a standard DNR, which, funny enough, when my mother was in the ICU earlier this year, we thought we had one. Turns out it was a very temporary one. And one of the nurses or the palliative care person or whatever came up and said, so we have your mother as a full code. For those of you who don't know, that means if she were to stop breathing, her heart were to stop, that means they would do literally everything. They would shove a tube down her throat and they would shock her until they were certain she was dead. That's not what she wanted. And I once she was aware enough, when she was in the ICU, we talked about it. Just, oh no, I don't want that. I don't want that. Right. So we got the DNR signed. So there's a DNR. We had talked in the previous end of life episode about MOLSS and POLSTs. MOLSS, I looked it up today, which, by the way, from that episode, we still didn't really know what they were because we're not in a state that does MOLSS.
Right.
There's 5 states in the Northeast that handle them. If you look it up, you might be one of them. POLSTs, basically, it's an end-of-life document. It's a very standard end-of-life document. More states take these POLSTs. Look it up. It's complicated. It's really complicated stuff. So, but I mean,
the point is research.
Handle this stuff in advance.
Yes, figure it out, because as confusing as this is for you and I right now, sitting here looking at each other across the dining room table when, knock on wood, we are living in the good old days.
Yes, we are.
When you're in the middle of a crisis situation to then suddenly realize that maybe you need these things.
Well, and I was at that point. I mean, I'm in the ICU and then they're telling me, well, as of right now, we're going to shock the hell out of your mother.
Yeah.
And I mean, thank God she and I are very much on the same page. Yeah. She does not want any of that stuff.
Yeah. But if your brother happened to be there at that specific moment.
Could be that he disagrees. Thankfully, he doesn't.
Right.
But
thankfully,
it could be.
He doesn't. And very, similar with me and my brother, who lives here locally, and we're the ones who are, really making most of these decisions. We're on the same page, but Lord knows, I mean, I have heard of plenty of situations where that is not the case.
Absolutely. Well, we've seen it on medical dramas and stuff. It always comes up because they need like the drama stuff. But there's one family member. No, I can't let go of Uncle Joey. Yeah. Do whatever you need to do, and basically Uncle Joey's essentially dead at this point.
Yeah.
So you just need to have this stuff taken care of in advance, so you know what they wanted.
Yeah. And I feel certain I mentioned this on a previous episode. I do not have them cataloged in my head in quite the same way that you do, Steve.
This is true.
Well, you didn't have to
100%
agree
true.
so readily, but yes, it is true. But my childhood friend who has 3 sisters and just so sad, lost their dad and then their mom in very short order, in about 3 months' time. And with their mom in particular, who ultimately was in a car accident and, in the hospital.
Not the kind of thing you plan for.
No. And thankfully, all 4 girls, were able to I think they basically kept their mom alive long enough for all 4 girls to get there. But my childhood friend out of that group, is a nurse now. And she was the one in the family who had been designated to have the medical power of attorney. And the other 3 girls recognized that, my friend was the one who could make the most, informed
medical decision.
Right. They're all educated girls. They could all make informed decisions, but really she was going to be the one. And in fact, I remember her sharing with me, like, once she heard the doctor give the full report of the state that their mom was in, I mean, she had to look at her sisters and say, no, there is nothing else that we could do. We could prolong this for some period of time, but it was going to have the same result. And then one of the other sisters is married to a financial advisor.
Yeah,
and
we have talked about this.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was kind of cool how they handle it. So they took care of the finances.
They took care of like the finances. The one daughter always lived with the parents. The house was left to her. She takes care of the house. One of the other daughters like had a huge love of art.
Really the
in the same.
best
I mean, it was
example of teamwork in a family that I have ever heard of.
4 girls and 4 very different personalities, and they really did like. They handled everything so beautifully in the face of what was really a very traumatic situation.
Yeah, it's atypical.
I think it probably is atypical, but anybody out there listening, and if you have siblings and if you can figure out how to, if you're not in a situation like that, that's as harmonious, I guess, maybe have that conversation because.
But I mean, in the end, it's best to have charted out what your loved one wants so you don't have to decide later. So, all right. So we're going to move on to a few things that are not necessarily legal, but they're kind of important. And some of this stuff could be covered in a will maybe, but at minimum, you should find out the answers to this stuff while you still can. For instance, do you know where your loved one wants to be buried and how they want to be buried? Right. I was shocked recently, I don't know, last couple of years to find out my mother wants to be cremated. I really had no idea, but it's mainly because then she can be buried in the same plot as my father,
right?
Who was not cremated, but they can just put her cremains on top of him, basically, for all of eternity.
Right.
So, but
that's a big deal too. I mean, some people have very specific, maybe religious beliefs or whatever that might
Many
be related to cremation.
Not fond of cremation.
And if you haven't really had that discussion, and maybe you're a family who's not in general a super religious family, but maybe you haven't even realized that your loved one has a very specific reason in their head that is just not for them. You need to know that.
Yeah. Well, and we've been going through I know your mother has her plans laid out, right?
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah. I mean,
my mother's actually been going through the process of this. She got some kind of piece of mail or something from the local funeral parlor or whatever that actually took care of my father. And basically she filled out some survey, which was really the whole purpose of that survey was to get a contact.
Sales.
Exactly. It's for sales. But it worked because it was actually a place that she intended to work with anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but now she's in that whole process of working it all out. She's picking her box now for her cremains. And she's planning on paying for it in advance, which we mentioned earlier about the whole insurance policy that's gone. She's going to pay for it in advance, so we don't have to.
Although, so forget the potential financial implication. I remember this very clearly. I remember you and me and your mom having to go pick out your dad's casket.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry. I don't mean to bring up
Yeah, it's okay. I kind of buried that one away.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But I remember the day after your father died, I still have the most vivid memory of walking in this.
I actually buried that one away pretty good.
Oh my gosh. And it was just sad and awful and emotional and literally the last thing that you want to be doing when you're in the middle of the first stages of grief.
So funeral homes are more than happy to store away your plans, and they'll let you pay for it in advance, or you can do a monthly payment. I suggested to my mother just pay for the whole thing at once. It doesn't matter, but it's expensive. And, most important, or just as important as that, I guess you could say, is I found out not all that long ago what my mother wants.
Right.
In terms of
small,
funeral.
Big, friends, no friends.
So here's what we did.
Graveside.
When her mother died, she was cremated. We took her cremains up to the cemetery, basically the family cemetery.
I know. We were talking about this recently. Speaking of things that I have completely put out of my head. I mean, I know I literally was in the the car with you.
Oh yeah, we put the cremains in the back of the car.
Right. I feel like I should have more of a memory of like, oh my gosh, we have cremains in the back of the car.
The remains of a dead person in the back of our car. Yeah, we drove them up to Pennsylvania.
I don't remember this.
Where our family cemetery, this is a cemetery where both sets of grandparents are buried there. My father's buried there. I've got aunts and uncles all over that place.
Yeah.
It's just, that's where our family's from in southeastern Pennsylvania. And we drove them up there. We stayed at a little Holiday Inn or whatever the heck it was in Delaware. And it was right over the line in Pennsylvania. And we took them down there. We basically, and it was, she died in the middle of the winter and the ground was too hard to dig up. So they said, basically, just bring them to the gravesite, leave them behind, do what you want to do to talk about it, and we will come out immediately after you leave.
That's a little unnerving, though.
But my mother said that is exactly what she wants. So
yeah,
we're going to be doing this
again. It's a little
again.
unnerving to walk away from a gravesite, and they're not actually going to put them in the ground at that moment.
They store them away. Literally, it was weird. Yeah, I know that part was a little strange.
She's where she wanted to be.
She's actually
Sorry,
in there.
y'all. We got to laugh about this a little bit, but I mean.
But that's exactly what my mother wants. She does not want a funeral, a big funeral. She doesn't want a church service. She doesn't want any of that stuff. She wants the immediate family, which is to say, you know, you and me, Jennifer, our kids, my brother, his kids, whatever great grandkids are available at that particular moment. She's got one right now, another one on the way.
Yeah.
But just basically all go up there, stand around the gravesite, say a few things, and leave.
Yeah.
That's what she wants.
Yep. Well, and so that's good to know. That will make things
we know
easier.
this. So basically, you need.
We're hoping this is a long time from now.
A long time from now. So, but what I guess basically what the big thing is here: do they want the expensive, big, giant funeral?
Yeah.
Do they want the small gathering? Do they want to basically throw the cremains in the back of the car and drive them 3 states or 4 states away or whatever it is? Do they want to be cremated? Are there life insurance policies that exist to help pay for funeral expenses? That's a big one. Obviously. So,
are you asking the question, like, are we supposed to answer that for people who are listening right now? Because I don't know.
No, they need to ask themselves that.
Okay.
They need to ask their loved ones
that. So they
that.
exist.
Do they exist? Does there...
With that person?
Yes.
I thought you were asking, like, philosophically.
No.
Let me just...
I don't even know what you mean right now.
Let me just toss this question out into the universe. Are there life insurance policies that actually... It's all an inflection. That cover funeral expenses?
I have no idea what you're talking about right now.
Or, Mom, do you have a life insurance policy that happens to cover funeral expenses?
You totally lost me there. I hope everyone else that's listening actually got what the heck she's talking about, because I'm totally lost right now.
Where is Mark, superfan Mark? Come on.
I feel
I'm
like sure we'll hear from him and say, I know exactly what Jennifer meant.
Thank you. Just the way it was written in the copious notes and the way I'm like, is this just let's just toss this question out.
Did you mean,
maybe someone...
are there life insurance policies that exist?
Yes.
Now I get it.
Oh my God.
Of course, that's what life insurance policies are for, Jennifer. In general, to pay for...
I mean, yes, but
that's the first thing.
But you make it sound like specifically like, okay, I've left you $100,000.
We are so off the rails.
$15,000 of it.
We are so off the rails.
Funeral expenses.
God. And this episode, I really didn't think it'd be a very long one, but we have managed to drag this thing out. I hope everyone appreciates just our banter. Anyway, so these are important decisions.
In short, it's important decisions that we all have to make.
Yes, and you should not have to make them on your own.
No.
Record them, have the discussions, record them in a legal way or not in a legal way, however these things work out. Put them in a lockbox. Avoid having to make those decisions on your own while you are grieving.
Yep. That. Wait. Oh, sorry.
There is one final note.
There is,
which is on the final page of
There's one final note. Only my pages were stuck together, so I couldn't get to it, which is like par for the course for this episode.
This episode's just off the rails.
We really appreciate anybody who has hung in there with us all the way to the end on this one.
Thank you.
All right. One final note. Most of these documents do have to be notarized, so don't forget that. This can be a big problem, of course, if you have someone who is not mobile enough to make it to
my mother.
Right, to make it to an attorney. But check in your area for a mobile notary who can come to your house or their house.
Mobile notaries are a thing.
Right. If they're in a facility, quite often someone on the staff even is a notary, which, by the way, I mean, all assisted living facilities, I think, should probably have notary.
They do. But my mother had to have this thing. I think I mentioned it earlier. She had to get a notary she's straightening out things, and she's basically taking control of the family plot because it was originally purchased by my father's mother and my uncle,
Right.
both deceased now. So
Yeah.
she was kind of taking control of that.
Yeah.
And she has to get it notarized. And there is a notary there, but she apparently is not qualified to do things like deeds, which is what this is. It's a deed.
How
to a
are you
tiny
not
little
qualified?
plot.
If you're
I
a
don't
notary,
know.
you're a notary. I
I
thought.
don't know.
But
We're getting
also,
it taken care of.
remember, like if you live in a neighborhood, like we live in a rather large neighborhood and we have a very active
There's
Facebook
always a
page.
notary laying around someplace.
Managed by this
Yeah.
handsome man sitting across the
Me,
dining room
yes.
table from
I am
from
the
me.
administrator
He's
of our
the
neighborhood
administrator.
Facebook page.
Sometimes that's
You're
a good
welcome.
thing, sometimes not. But anyway, yes, you put out the call recently and someone was like, "Yep, come on over." You tried to pay her. She was like, "Absolutely not. No problem."
This is
So-
your payment for dealing with our neighborhood every day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Are we done?
We are.
I'm
I
going to
think,
finish
done.
drinking my glass of wine. And I mean, I've not even had a full glass of
You
wine.
have
I'm just
not.
saying.
So thanks to everyone for making it to the end of this episode. It's been a bit of a week. It's been a bit of a couple of weeks for us. We're a little frazzled in the head. If you'd like to get in touch with us with a question that maybe we'll answer it, we can, make some kind of episode out of it. I don't know. You can email us caregivinggenxstyle@gmail.com. You can send us a text or a voicemail. Please send us voicemails. We love them so much.
We really do.
804-723-1221. We are on Twitter. Our handle is @GenXCaregiving. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, we now have an account on Blue Sky as well,
So cool.
which is a Twitter alternative.
Yep. Love it.
And it's growing really fast. So I thought I'd go ahead and get our handle on there. The handle there is also genxcaregiving.bluesky, however it all works. You can find it, I'm sure. You can also find us on Facebook. The best way to do that is to go to the show notes for this episode. You'll find the link and just click on it. It takes you right there. Facebook is where we post the most. We hope to hear from you soon. Have a great day.
I'm going to get another glass of wine. Good night, everyone.